You've been taught a lie about literary analysis. That old line, the author uses repetition for emphasis, it's a high school lie and it's holding your grades hostage. You write it, you know it's basic, and your teacher clocks it instantly. Repetition is one of the most powerful tools in literature, but 90% of students don't know how to write about it. What if I told you that there is a 5-step method for writing about repetition in any work of literature or nonfiction, and that writing about it the way I'm teaching you will make you stand out as a sophisticated writer in all the readers' minds? Yes! I'm Clay Zuba, inventor of Zubify. If you think that writing about repetition just means circling it and writing down emphasis or creates bigger effect, then today I'm about to give you a giant upgrade that's like moving from a flip phone to a new iPhone 17. Yes! You probably learned to spot repetition when you were in elementary school. Circle the repeated words. Easy, right? But here's what no one tells you. Spotting and analyzing repetition are completely different skills. If you're still writing things like, the author uses repetition to create emphasis, you're not really analyzing. You're just describing what you saw. And that's not necessarily your fault. Maybe no one taught you that that's not how to think about repetition, or how to think about repetition systematically. That's okay. That's why I'm here. Today is part one of a 2-part series. Today we're focusing on repetition in poetry and fiction, where repetition creates experience. It makes readers feel something. In part 2, we'll tackle repetition in nonfiction and in speeches, where repetition creates persuasion. It moves audiences towards actions and belief. It's the same analytical technique, but for completely different purposes. Here's what separates repetition in literature from repetition in other types of writing. In poetry and fiction, repetition creates experience, not just emphasis. When Edna St. Vincent Millay repeats an entire phrase in her poem Recuerdo, she's not just trying to convince you of anything. She's inviting you to feel the contradiction of a powerful memory. It's repetition as experience in creation. If you've watched my video on how to write about imagery or metaphors and similes, you know this poem. We're returning to Recuerdo because it's perfect for demonstrating how different literary devices work. The same poem that taught you to analyze imagery and metaphorical language will now show you how to master the analysis of repetition. Yes! Let me show you how to analyze repetition in this poem systematically. Step 1, identify the repetition as a complete unit. This is crucial. Don't break apart the repetition. Analyze the entire phrase that the author is choosing to repeat. It's true in Recuerdo, Millay does repeat the word we, but she's repeating it as part of an entire unit in the opening of each stanza. She writes, "We were very tired, we were very merry, we had gone back and forth all night on the ferry." The complete 2-line unit here appears 3 times in the poem. That's what we analyze, not just the isolated words. Step 2 is to map the pattern and the placement. In other words, where does this repetition appear? It appears at the opening of stanza 1, it appears at the opening of stanza 2, it appears at the opening of stanza 3. What's the pattern that you see here? Each stanza begins with this identical foundation, then develops different aspects of memory. Why does placement matter? Beginning placement sets an emotional tone for each stanza. Every development of the memory returns to a central contradiction. Step 3 is to analyze the language of the complete unit. Don't just define the words, examine what they suggest. We were very tired, we were very merry. Very tired shows physical and emotional exhaustion. Very merry shows joy, celebration, and lightness. Notice how I'm picking somewhat more complex words here than just happy or sad. If your inclination is to write happy or sad, then you might not be thinking deeply about what these words actually mean. Try to use sophisticated language that exactly paraphrases what the author is saying or what you're getting from the poem. Sad and very tired are not the same thing. The contradiction in this entire unit is important to note because it captures the paradox of intense experiences that simultaneously drain and fulfill you. This is suggested in "We had gone back and forth all night on the ferry." Back and forth suggests repetitive motion. Perhaps it's symbolic of the back and forth nature of the relationship or of memory. All night is a long time. It shows intensity. It's outside of your everyday experiences and your routines. The night is often a special, mystical time. It's a time where things can happen that don't happen in the day. The fairy shows a transitional space. It's between destinations. It's a liminal experience. The complete unit then creates a memory that's both exhausting and exhilarating. It's the kind of night that defines young love. Step 4 is to examine why the placement creates this effect. Why do you think Millais begins this stanza with each instance of this repetition? Beginning placement means every new development of the memory returns to this foundational contradiction. The repetition thereby creates kind of a hypnotic, almost incantatory effect, like the way powerful memories loop in our minds. What would change if the repetition appeared elsewhere? If the phrase appeared at the end of stanzas, it would feel like a conclusion or a summary. At the beginning, it feels like a launching point for each new aspect of the memory. Step 5 is to connect this all back to the author's purpose. Remember, in poetry, repetition is creating reading experience. Millais uses repetition to make the readers feel what it's like to have a memory that's simultaneously exhausting and magical. The contradiction between tired and memory mirrors the contradiction of powerful experiences that cost us something, but give us back more. So you can see that the repetition doesn't just describe memory. It recreates the obsessive way that significant memories replay in our minds, always returning to the same central moment that defined the experience. You can see the way then that this repetition is about creation, not persuasion. Millais isn't trying to convince us this night was important. She's making us feel the quality of the importance. Now, I told you that repetition was the easiest thing to identify, but it's not the easiest thing to write about. Before you decide you're going to write about repetition, you should ask yourself some questions. 1. Can you map where each instance of repetition appears? Is it at the beginning, the middle, the end of lines of sentence or paragraphs? Is it scattered throughout the poem, or is it all bunched up in one particular spot? 2, can you explain what the repeated words mean beyond their literal definition? If you can't in your head start thinking beyond very tired and very sad, and start thinking about connotation and associations, you're not going to be able to write about this particular repetition. Can you identify the pattern and the frequency? Is it in every line? Does it build intensity? Can you explain why repetition appears in these specific positions? Question 5, can you connect the repetition to the author's larger purpose? This is the most important part of writing about repetition. And if you can't immediately see it, you should either think about it more or choose a different literary device to write about. If you can't map the pattern, if you can only define the words literally, if you can't see an organizational pattern, if you can't explain why the placement matters, if you can only find yourself saying it creates emphasis over and over, you've hit some red flags, and you should pick a different literary device. Your essay will only be stronger. Let's look at 3 student examples now. From cooked to clocked, yes. Here's our cooked example. Millais repeats the opening lines to emphasize the memory and make it seem more powerful. I hope you can see that this analysis is totally cooked. It doesn't do any of the things that we've talked about writing about today. It does note location, but other than that, it can only write vaguely about the repetition. Here's some better analysis. Millais repeats the opening 2 lines at the beginning of each stanza to establish the contradictory emotions that define this memory. This is a little better, but it's still not specific. It's not analyzing the language, and it's not being specific about emotions or about purpose. Here's our clocked example. Millais employs repetition of the complete opening unit. We were very tired, we were very merry, we had gone back forth all night on the ferry at the beginning of each stanza to create an incantatory effect that mirrors how powerful memories loop obsessively in our minds. This repetition establishes the central contradiction between exhaustion and joy that defines intense romantic experience, making readers feel the particular quality of a night that simultaneously drains and fulfills. Yes. Notice how the clocked analysis answers all our essential questions. It maps the where at the beginning of each stanza. It shows beyond literal meaning where it says contradiction between exhaustion and joy. This explains what tired and merry suggest. It identifies a pattern. It says complete opening unit, repeated 3 times. It explains why the placement matters. It says creates an incantatory effect that mirrors how powerful memories loop. And finally, it connects to purpose where it says making readers feel the particular quality. that is showing experience in creation. This is what complete analysis looks like. Every element working together to show how repetition creates meaning. Here's what separates cooked from clocked. Weak analysis just identifies repetition and guesses at emphasis. Strong analysis shows how the complete repeated unit and its specific pattern creates a particular reading experience that serves the author's artistic purpose. Don't just tell the reader what repeats. Show the reader how the repetition works in this rhetorical situation. Now, poetry creates beautiful experiences, but here's where it gets really powerful. When speakers use repetition to move hearts and minds toward action. In part 2, I'm going to show you how the Founding Fathers used repetition in the Declaration of Independence to make revolution feel necessary and justified an entire nation. The analytical technique is exactly the same, but the purpose, revolutionary. Thanks for watching Zubify. Remember, queens and kings don't just repeat what they see. They analyze how repetition creates experience. Like and subscribe, and come back for part 2.